This is the Church of St. Paul in the Desert.
In the name of God, source of all being, incarnate Word, and Holy Spirit. So, do you all know what time it is? As Advent season arrives again, we reset the liturgical theological clock and push the reset button and begin a new cycle. And of course, what the Advent clock says is way ahead of what you're going to see on the bank clock or on your wristwatch, because now is the time. And the answer to what time it is was in your second reading today, which is kind of a classic Advent reading. You just heard this read a few moments ago. This answers the question of what time it is. You know what time it is. How it is now the moment for you to wake from sleep. For salvation is nearer to us now than when we became believers. The night is far gone. The day is near. Let us lay aside the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. And so we come again to Advent, which is about not just one coming of Christ, but three comings of Christ. The first, and the one that's most obvious, is Bethlehem, Christmas, about 4 weeks from now. But that's the least of it. The other coming of Christ that we don't talk about so much is the one at the end of the circle in the journey. The first time Jesus came, he kind of snuck into the manger. Not too many people saw it, a few shepherds, and who are shepherds. But at the end, when Jesus comes again, and that's an essential Christian belief from the very beginning, this time when Jesus comes, everybody's going to know it, whether they like it or not. Or as one theologian put it, it will be a cosmic regime change, a whole new ballgame. God will have the last word. And in between, where we live, because we live between the already, Bethlehem, and the not yet, the coming of Christ, we live here in the now. And so maybe the most important coming of Christ is how Christ comes to us now, at this moment, in this place, in this time. I'm not sure it's true, but I think it's true, but Winston Churchill, supposedly, before he died, arranged for his funeral at Westminster Abbey to have taps played right at the end of his service, and then there was a distinct pause, and then they played Reveille, which I think is pretty interesting. The end and the end. Well, the problem is we are in a waiting mode, and the church is in a waiting mode. That's our ministry, is to wait, because we live in between the already and the not yet. And the problem is, waiting is hard. I don't know about you, but I hate waiting. I don't like waiting in the doctor's office, waiting to finally get my name called, especially when I don't feel good. I don't wait well when I'm wondering when that package is going to finally come in the mail. Sometimes I don't wait well while I'm waiting for the light to change. And if you're a child, if someone tells me that 3 weeks from now is Christmas, well, that might as well be a geological time frame as far as kids are concerned. That's forever. And just yesterday, I heard from several folks who tried to do their turkey dinner down at Agua Caliente, and it took them 2 hours to get in. I don't know about you, but I don't wait well. The early church had to deal with this because they thought, incorrectly, that Christ, that end thing, that final revelation of God where everyone will see it, they thought it was going to come pretty quick. And they were wrong. It didn't happen. They had to dig in for the long haul, and that's where we are today, still in that now time, waiting for that day when God will finally reveal everything at last. So we live on the edge. And the problem with waiting a long time is it loses its edge, doesn't it? You can't stay at battle stations forever. You just begin to lose interest. And I think what's happened in the life of the church, well, with the exception of some folks who get so anxious when things are turbulent that they want to find a date and predict when Jesus is coming, but for most Christians, most mainline persons like us, we sort of get indifferent about it. It's been a couple thousand years. We don't think about it much. Maybe some of us don't even believe it. And so instead we go Christmas shopping, thinking that all Advent is about is, this 3-week run up to Christmas, which is the least of it. But that's where we get to because it's hard to keep waiting. I can remember ordering a prayer book years ago that had just been published. It was something that I really was looking forward to, had a lot of passion about. It had to do with daily prayer, which is a part of my life. And I really wanted to get my hands on that book and actually use it. And I thought that stupid book would never come. Every day, checking the mail. No, it isn't there. We don't do this waiting thing very well. And that's just minor stuff. How hard it is to wait when someone we love is battling something like drug addiction and the constant setbacks and struggles that go on with people who battle substance abuse and trying to be healed, and how difficult that path can be. How long does this chemo have to go on? How long will that stupid tumor still be there? Why is it still there? How long do we have to wait before our national leaders will really get serious about the fact that 7 billion people living on this planet are having an impact, and the evidence is there, it's overwhelming? When are we going to really get serious? Why does a 16-year-old girl from Sweden have to show up at the United Nations to tell all those adults what they should have known and been doing something about long ago? How long do we have to wait? And of course, the world is a mess. It still is. The news is bad every day. It gets worse. How long does this have to go on? And so we who live in between the now long for finally getting this resolved. And that's the Advent message and the Advent hope. The bad news is that we're in the long run not going to be able to save ourselves. Now that doesn't mean we haven't done some incredibly beautiful things as human beings. Amazing accomplishments, and we can be thankful and grateful. But in the long run, we cannot save ourselves. And that's part of the judgment part, or the dark part of Advent. We're going to need some help because we're not pulling it off. We've had thousands of years to sort this out, and it's still not working. The next election, the next social advance, the next scientific breakthrough, the next technological wonder, none of these things are going to save us. They simply aren't. And we have to face into that fact. This is the tough part of Advent, that we're going to need help because we can't do it. It's going to take a God. And that's the good news of Advent. There is one. And there is one who is at the other end of that journey. In the ancient world, history was understood very cyclically. Every year, the same cycle around the crops and the harvesting and the seeds. And it was the same thing year after year, and most of their gods were agricultural type gods, having to do with the weather and the seasons and the rains and the snow. Round and round every year. Gets kind of old. The Jewish Christian tradition is quite the opposite. History is linear. There was a beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and there will be an ending at the other end of the line. That someday this story will finally come to its conclusion. We don't know when, we don't know how. There's many different views and viewpoints within the Christian tradition about how that looks or what it looks like, but there will be a final accounting. Yes, judgment. And we await that day. Well, we have to face into the human reality that sin is a reality, whether everybody likes the word or not, who cares? It's a reality. The humanistic impulse of humanity was so strong toward the end of the 19th century. We thought we could accomplish so many great things, the Industrial Revolution and all that stuff. And then came the slaughter of World War I. And that smashed a lot of pious notions about how wonderful we could pull things off. And then just in case somebody didn't get the message, we had a second World War with an even greater slaughter. This doesn't negate the good things that humans do, but it's a reminder that we're going to need some help. And that's the way it's going to have to be. That's the Advent hope. There is someone coming for dinner, and we are awaiting that great day. Well, while we wait in the now time between the already and the not yet, how do we cope? How do we put up with this? How do we survive? And I think the Advent code for living is incredibly simple. It boils down to two simple two-letter words. Two simple two-letter words. As if. We are to live as if at any moment Christ could indeed come again, or at any moment we might have an opportunity to love somebody and make a difference or make decisions that really matter. Whether it's the end or just another step toward the end doesn't matter. We're to live as if at any moment we might have to decide whether to love or not, to make a difference or not. The future imposes itself on us and affects how we live. This is not just an apathetic, oh my gosh, I'm going to hang around and wait till something happens. The future, the end of that story, impacts how we live now. I ran into acquainted myself recently with a book by a Roman Catholic deacon named Loris, who is now no longer with us on this earth, who writes how after he got the diagnosis of Lou Gehrig's disease, reported and shared that incredibly, despite that awful diagnosis, he discovered the most blessed time of his life and the richest source of blessings that he had ever known, partly because he now knew there was an end to his journey. And he reported three things in particular. I pass them on to you. The first thing was suddenly the time to pray and taking time to pray and just rest and be became incredibly important. Don't give me that nonsense, you don't have time to pray. Everybody has time to pray. You just got to decide to do it. Maybe you have to delay the Christmas shopping a few hours. The second thing was how precious and valuable relationships are. The people in your life, the people you care about, the people who care about you, that becomes incredibly gold, incredibly precious. Pay attention. Not next week, now. And the third thing that was a blessing for him in the face of this termination, this ending, was to finally give up the illusion that he was in control. What a freedom that is, to finally give up that nonsense that we think we're in control, because we're not. And it's okay. There is a God who is in control, and that's our hope and our trust. Underwritten and guaranteed by what we call Bethlehem, the other Advent, 3 weeks from now. That God has already made his appearance. You can count on the fact that he wasn't lying when he says he will come again. So, that's how we survive as if. Because things can happen in a moment, as momentarily and then suddenly as that half a second when you're not paying attention while you're driving and you lose control of that car and you start to go off the road. As suddenly as that phone call that changes your life forever. As suddenly as the moment the earth seems to move and you wonder, is this the big one? As suddenly as that, or as suddenly as going around the corner and bumping into somebody who needs to be loved, and there you are in a position to do something about it, to cast the armor of love on someone who needs a smile, a handshake, some food, some friendship, an embrace. As if at any moment those things can happen and your opportunity dawns. That's how we live in the Advent world. I love the story of the Roman Catholic priest who went rushing into the cardinal's office, all anxious, breaking into his office, interrupting his work and saying, Your Eminence, there's a lady down in the chapel who says Christ the Savior has just appeared and he's down in the chapel. What do we do about it? And the cardinal said, Look busy, son, look busy. The Advent waiting is not about sitting around passively drinking beer and watching TV, as wonderful as those things may be. Advent waiting is very busy. There is so much to do, so much to be prepared for, because at any moment you could have an opportunity to make a difference. That's how we live on the edge with hope. We are to live as if Jesus is already here. And by the way, he is. That's why we break the bread. That's why we do the Christmas thing. He's already here. And to quote a theologian, I can't take credit for it, to quote another theologian who once said, You know, God never comes precisely when I want him to come, but he's always right on time. Now. Amen.